Greetings, life management students, and welcome to our conversation about information literacy and how to communicate that information. So what does that mean, information literacy? We're really talking about maybe using resources to gather information, such as the library, the internet, books, research journals, articles. So these are all places that we gather information from. So we're going to talk about like the correct way to do it and the incorrect way to do it. So again, we want to find information, and once we find information, for instance, if you find something on the internet, then you want to evaluate the information to determine, is it accurate? Sometimes when my kids come up to me and say something like, you know, Mom, I read that kids are only supposed to get 6 hours of sleep, so it's okay if I stay on my phone till 2 a.m. I would say to my kids something like, can you show me the article that says that? Because I need to evaluate the information. Was it written by a scholar? Was it written with research behind it? Or is it just something they found on the internet because they would like to be able to stay on their phone until 2 a.m.? Typically the third is what really happened. But you want to find the information, then you want to determine whether it's valid by evaluating the information, and then you want to be able to communicate it, whether it's doing a presentation in class, you have a speech to give, or it's writing a paper, right? Or you're communicating somehow what you've learned. So let's see here, the information that you need. So if you're talking about a library, and we're talking about going to a library, we start at the library and we're gonna find tons of information. It's actually gonna probably be information overload. So there's books, there's journals that have tons of articles in the journals, there's newspapers and magazines, encyclopedias, databases, which is where we find a lot of our information nowadays. And then course reserves. So for instance, for this class, I have a reserve book, a book that a student could use, excuse me, when they're in the library. So again, that's what course reserve means. So all of these are different places where we can gather information. So we then, again, once we find something, have to evaluate the information. So books, have you heard of the publisher? Are they from a reputable company? The journal article, is it peer-reviewed? And here's what that means. So when we write an article for a journal, in order to be accepted for publication, it has to be reviewed by other scholars. And that really validates your information. So we read the story earlier in the semester about the two foster youth, about Renata and Amanda. And that was my first publication in a journal. And in order for it to be accepted into the journal, it was reviewed by other scholars to determine it was valid, right? So we want to do that. Websites. Okay, so where's the website from? Are there doctors talking on it? Are there people that are scholars? Does it come, is it linked to other reputable? Do you see any ads or things that talk about buying, subscribing to things or purchasing things? You don't want that. You don't want websites that take you to somewhere where they want you to buy information, right? The author, is it credible? So do you recognize the author's name? Is it an instructor? Is it a professor at a college? Not that all professors would be accurate in their information, but it's kind of a good pointing in that direction, right? Objectivity, so quality, is it something that you can really see objectively on all sides of the argument or the case, right? If the author has tunnel vision, which may mean is bias, right? Then we need to be aware of that, right? Because all of us have to be open to two sides of every story. Is it current? If you're looking to write something and you find an article that's 30 years old, more than likely we've had more current information on your topic, and your instructor is not going to be happy that you're citing sources that are 30 years old unless that's the only source that has information about that topic. All right, Wikipedia. I'll bet many of us have looked at Wikipedia. Here's some concerns that we have about this, is that, the information cannot be completely accurate. So we need to think about that. A couple things to think about here is investigate the wealth of electronic resources available through our library. In other words, you don't need to be, this is so important, you don't need to actually be standing in a library for you to take advantage of the resources. From home, because you are a Delta College student, you can actually log on to the library services and you can actually go through a database. And what is a database? A database is a big collection of information. So when I was earning my doctorate degree in education, we had a database full of education articles because that's what I was concerned about. That's what I was writing about. I wasn't concerned at that point about nursing. And so I wasn't looking at nursing databases, but there are business databases. There are all kinds of databases and you can log into them with your ID from home. So you don't have to be in the library to actually take advantage of the resources the library can offer, right? Communicate information through writing. This is a big one. This is what we do. Remember I mentioned, I think before that when I was doing my doctorate degree at UOP, the way we communicated was through writing. I never took a test. I never had to do anything of that nature. I had to write. And the writing is what you were graded on. Sometimes for a whole semester, all you had to do was write one paper. Now it was probably a 50-page paper, but that's all your grade was based on, one paper. Therefore, you had to make sure you did this, communicate through writing. So think about if you have to write a paper for a class, maybe you're not looking forward to it. Maybe you're concerned about your writing skills. There's a couple positive things you can do here. Number one is clarify, what are you doing here? So is this a paper for a history class? And I'm supposed to write about an event in history. And so the pros and cons on the decision-making of that event and what would I do, right? So then I want to clarify the purpose. The purpose is to, again, show accurate information. Is the purpose to persuade somebody? If you're taking a legal class, you might definitely be looking at persuading a jury or persuading people through your writing, right? Or is it just are you in theater and you're looking to entertain? Or do you want to write a story or a screenplay or a movie, things like that? Make a plan out each part of this paper that you're going to do. Preparing, getting all the information ahead of time, writing your first draft, and then of course revising it. So choosing create information through write. So choose a topic. Sometimes that's chosen for us. If your instructor says you need to write a paper on XYZ topic, you don't have a choice. If your instructor says you can write a paper on anything you choose, then you can choose that. So pick something that interests you. If your grandparent died of Alzheimer's disease, and maybe it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about that topic, but pick something that you're connected to. Conduct the research. This is where you're going to have to actually connect to the library, whether it's in person or online. And you're going to get information from the library, right? And then you're going to start to sit down and create this outline. This is a step that a lot of students miss, and I think it's really, really important. The importance of creating an outline is that it helps to organize your thoughts. Because typically when we have to write a paper, we're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed with all the information we found. We don't know what to include and how to include it. So the outline gives us structure. It gives us a body. And so it helps our mind to kind of organize what we're going to talk about, right? Now, it doesn't help you actually do the research part. This helps you with the writing part. The research you should have done already. Right? Sorry about that. The research you should have done. You should have organized your thoughts, done all that. Now we're going to sit down and write. And we're going to create this outline to help us do the writing part of it. So here's kind of a sample outline. We're going to have an introductory paragraph. This is standard for most papers. Introduction. When I read somebody's introduction, I want to have what I call a roadmap. I love it. I love it. When students will have this introductory paragraph, and at the end of the paragraph, they'll say something like, in this paper, I will cover why I chose this topic, what Alzheimer's disease is and how we can prevent it. And I will conclude talking about my personal connection to this disease. They gave me a road map. The student told me where I'm going to go. When I'm reading this paper, I'm going to travel this road and it's going to cover those three things. And I love it. It's something that really kind of like, I'm going to grade you well because you've started off with the bang. And then you're going to structure it by having those big headers, which are the main sections. And then underneath those main sections, we have smaller sections, right? So this is kind of a sample of what you look at. writing your first draft. This is typically the hardest part for students, is to get going. I don't know how to start my paper, right? So you're going to do some things like use a thesis sentence. That's a statement of purpose. Tell me, what is your belief, your premise? What is this paper kind of about? Craft an engaging introduction. We all kind of like this. This is the hook. This is how we snag students, or we snag readers. We give you something that connects you to this paper, or it's funny, or something that helps us to want to keep reading. Think critically. This is not something that you want to take lightheartedly, unless you're writing a letter to your friend. This should be something that has evidence, it has research in it, right? It's critically thought out. And then structure the paragraphs carefully, and this has to do with grammar. Right? This has to do with just, sometimes I have students submit a paper in paragraph form, and the whole entire paper for pages is one paragraph. They didn't break up their paper into different paragraphs, and so they don't know how to use that grammar. And that's something that we would expect in a paper. All right, so we want to here revise and polish our paper. Include transitions. What is a transition? A transition is the way that you go from sometimes one topic or subheading to another. So I just finished talking about how devastating Alzheimer's disease can be. I talked about all the consequences of it. How do I transition into something positive? What words do I use, or sentence do I use as a transition sentence there? That's what we're talking about. So also be aware of, how does your instructor, or wherever you are, expect your paper to be formatted? There's different ways that we write papers. For the purpose of this class in life management, we use what we call the APA format. It's a style, it's a way that you write. And we went to the Writing Center and we picked up some handouts on APA format. In general, we said APA format is double spaced. It is 1-inch margins all around the paper, right? 12-point font. So there's specific ways. So I don't expect a paper that has 1/2-inch margins, that's single spaced. That's not what I expect, because APA formats outlines for you how you should type up or write this paper, right? And that's what I would expect you to do. One of the reasons that we as instructors like APA format is because it's double spaced. And when you're grading papers, it's very difficult for me to write comments or to make things when the lines are so close together in single spacing. So we like double spacing. Read your paper out loud to hear yourself and see if it makes sense. Sometimes you'll read your own paper and go, oh my gosh, I didn't do a transition, or I kind of just jumped from one thing to the other, and the person's going to be thinking, what happened here? What are we talking about? Ask someone else to read it. That's a good one. Growing up, my mom she became a lawyer in her later years, and so she was really good at English and grammar. And so when I was in college, I always went to her to read my papers and help me with them. Use campus resources, definitely. So when we have an online class, how do we write? Remember that even though we're in an online format, your papers or your conversations should be like you were writing or talking in class. So you should be using complete sentences. Excuse me, sometimes I will have students do things like they add a discussion or a comment or a post, and it's written in like what I think of as text language, which is very brief. Yes, period. I agree, period. We're done. And that's not really going to work, right? So we still, even though it's an online class, your instructor is expecting complete sentences. So you would say something like, Susie, I can see your point. I understand and I get that what you're saying about this topic, it makes sense to me too. Something I might also thought of was XYZ. So you're using complete sentences. One of the things to be careful about in this online format class is when we're using just words in a box, we can't really see facial expression and you can't read body language. You don't understand tone. Therefore, sometimes you read someone's post and you think, what? You get angry because you think that's offensive. Or what are they saying about my work? They're saying they didn't agree with it. Where do they get off? Right? You get all mad because you feel like somebody was saying something negative, but they really weren't. It's just that I can't read the body language and the tone through words only because I can't see you. and therefore I have to be careful. So make sure that we write in complete sentences so the person understands what we're saying and they don't. Maybe it's okay to disagree with students. I actually encourage that, because with disagreement comes conversation, and we're learning different points of view, and I want that, right? Pay attention again to your emotions and keep your emotions in check, right? So research suggests that creating an outline leads to greater productivity during writing. So students who create an outline produce higher quality papers than students who don't. So this is what we want. So we want you to use that thing where I take a blank piece of paper and I just say, well, at least I know I'm going to have an introduction and a conclusion. In the middle, maybe I want to talk about what is Alzheimer's, why I'm my personal connection to it, and how we can prevent it. Maybe those are the three big headers. And then underneath those, I have some subtopics, right? So create that outline. All right, as you can see from all the red here, this is an important topic. This is talking about plagiarism. We want to avoid plagiarism. So plagiarism is when one person uses another person's words or ideas, not just words, and presents them as their own. So in other words, you copy something you found on the internet, you copy and paste, and you don't use quotation marks or you don't cite. Right? So when we're in class, make sure you're taking notes in your own words. If you do copy my words, you put quotation marks. That's fine. I've had students write papers, and in their papers, they'll actually mention, Professor Westland on this day said, and they quote me what I said. That's not plagiarism, because they're telling you who the words belong to. They belong to me, right? And they're using quotation marks. That's okay. So we want to use those quotation marks for direct quotations. When you cite, you acknowledge that you are including someone else's ideas in your paper. So citation, so in an APA format, if you write something and it's direct quotations, or it's not even direct quotations, it's just an idea, at the end of the sentence, you'll usually in paragraphs have the author and the year of when they wrote that. And that's what we mean by cite. Inside of the body of work, you need to say where that comes from. A lot of times students will think to themselves when they're confronted with plagiarism, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know. And we're teaching you how to be successful students, and you kind of know when something's not your own, right? So plagiarism is not always intentional. However, you're still going to suffer the consequences even though it's not intentional. So keep in mind that you want to cite inside of your body of work. You want to use quotation marks, and at the end of your paper, if you're using other people's words or ideas, you have to have what we call a reference page or a bibliography, where you're writing down where you found that information at, whether it was online at a website or in a book or journal, wherever it be. Keep in mind that at colleges across, at all colleges basically, you will definitely fail the course that you are in and possibly be expelled from the whole institution for plagiarism. It's big. It's a really, really big issue. So I can't stress enough how important it is for you to either do your own work. You can use someone else's ideas and words. You just have to give them credit for it. That's all. All right, so now let's say that you have to present the information, whether it's standing up in front of a class and giving an oral presentation or in some other format. You want to know your purpose, know your audience, right? How many people will be there? How much do they know about my topic? How can I capture their interest? So open up with something interesting. I always tell students, if you struggle with public speaking, then you want to look right over the heads of everybody at the back wall. But if you look right over their heads, you kind of get they think that you're kind of looking in their direction at least, right? You don't want to be looking at the floor or only at the board or in a corner of a room. Right? Eye contact is important. So make sure that you have all these different things to craft into your presentation, and use visual aids. I tell students visual aids are so helpful, because if I were talking up here and I had a PowerPoint slide behind me, your eyes are on the PowerPoint slide instead of me. And for most of us, we like that because it helps us to deal with public speaking. Right? So we have a visual aid. Now your visual aid should really convey just main ideas, right? Main ideas, not not all of the words that I'm speaking. And you notice that when I go through this class with you, you will have something here on the slide, but then I'll give you an example, or I'll try to share with you more. And that's what we want you to do. So visual aids, you don't want to have a visual aid that has tons of writing, so much writing that people are squinting to see it. It's not going to be good. Don't do that. And then practice, practice, practice. This is what makes you an awesome speaker, is practice. So make sure that you're practicing and practice. Pretend on your friends, family, inanimate objects, or your stuffed animal, whatever it is, right? And make sure you're prepared. You arrive on time. You set up the PowerPoint so it works. The worst thing will be to start your presentation and it's not working. Make sure to do that. And catch your breath. And if you freeze, if you forget everything you were about to say, if you freeze, take a breath, collect yourself. You can even say, can you give me a minute real quick, right? And just take a moment, focus back, don't panic. Okay? All right, so again, technology. This is when we're talking about using PowerPoint, using Google Hangout, using different tools where we can communicate with each other. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the power of technology. Tons of things that we can do online. Some of us are better at it than others, right? So when we talk about the work environment, make sure to sell yourself to your employer, right? When you know how to express your ideas effectively, you make a meaningful contribution to your company. So when I think about when I was a manager, if I had an employee that came to me and this employee sat down and tried to say, you know, I have this idea of how we can improve our department. I love to hear that. And they try to express it to me and I don't understand what they're saying. Either they're fumbling with their words or their ideas are kind of, they're so nervous, they're all chopped up. If they can't communicate the idea to me, it doesn't help. When I have somebody who can articulate, meaning that they can speak the idea because they practiced on family members or whoever before coming to talk to the boss, then I'm very, very excited. And I think, wow, maybe this person could lead up that new department or lead up this idea they're talking about, right? So make sure that you understand how important, whether we communicate verbally or communicate in writing, either way, your employers really care about it. They really, really do. It's very, very important, right? And so looking here, these are just a couple examples you can look at if talking about different types of careers and how we would be able to use that information and communication skills in those different areas, whether it's presenting face-to-face, whether it's writing up reports, whether it's demonstrating skills, all of those different types of things. All right, so that concludes our conversation on communication literacy and how we can find information and make sure to avoid plagiarism. I will see you next time.